I don't know.
Tyler.
Sean.
Well, I was going to ask how it was going, but I think you answered that question.
It's I had my coffee on the toilet, so that's how it's going.
It sounds like you're still on the toilet.
Actually, I just got up.
Okay.
Like, if you just started recording a second ago, you got a part of me on the toilet.
Okay, well then in that case, if you literally just got up, I'll answer the question first while you wipe.
Oh no, I wipe before I get up, but please continue.
Okay. Well then I guess I'll ask you first again then. What are you drinking?
Well, I just told you, but it's coffee.
Okay, so I thought you said you had your coffee while you were on the toilet.
It's still yes. I'm having coffee. I don't know how many weeks in a row I've gone with just having coffee on this thing, but I don't know. I don't ever feel like it in the morning anymore. So just lots of coffee.
Well,
and you?
Well, I am here in a few hours, like 4.5 hours, am going to be selling bodily fluids to somebody, and they said no caffeine for 4 to 6 hours before, and no alcohol for 6 to 12 hours before. And then they also said, and also please drink lots of fluids besides. So I am drinking water.
I'm trying to think of what fluids you could possibly be donating, because I've never heard anyone tell me that for donating blood.
Mm-hmm. It is actually plasma. So all they're doing is pulling the water out of my blood, basically.
Oh well, if it's just plasma, it's different.
Yeah.
Ugh, gross.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing it because primarily because no one's subscribed to our Patreon yet, and the two main reasons for why they haven't done that. The first one is because they don't particularly want to, and the second reason is because we don't have one.
Yeah. I love it. Just holding people borderline hostage. Like, well, everyone listen to this thing. You've done so poorly in supporting us that you're not even required to do that. I'm forced to sell plasma.
Well, there's actually the real reason is because they're doing some kind of special like for the next month. And usually, at my place, I'm going to do this. You can get $120 a week, which still isn't awful, and I may keep doing it afterwards. But now you're getting $100 to $130 per donation, which is twice a week. So,
that's quite a lot of money for plasma.
Yeah, so I was like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that twice a week for a month.
Yeah.
I'd say that 2 of them towards the end of the month are only $95, so not over $100 all of them. But basically it is at the end of the month. If you do twice a week for the whole month, at the end of the month you've made $900.
I would probably go donate plasma too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's great.
Anyway, subscribe to our OnlyFans.
Yes. It's just a picture of a bunch of fans.
Let's see, mine is my picture of my OnlyFan.
See, that's unfortunate for me because I have 3 ceiling fans in my house.
Poop, I do have ceiling fans. I only have 1 fan, though.
That makes sense. What on earth are we talking about today?
I assume we're talking about Lovecraft Untold.
Ah, good.
But I guess we didn't. I just realized we didn't actually specify that this morning.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd say that. Because our original schedule had us doing book club this week, and I haven't read it.
We skipped an entire week. No one listening would know that because we had some stuff backlogged technically. But yeah, we technically skipped things. But yeah, we thought we'd go back and do another Lovecraft video game because it made sense to do another one.
We haven't talked about anything Lovecraft in a while, and it's also been a while since we talked about games, and that's kind of our shtick.
Yeah, that's our intersection.
Yeah. Don't say that.
That's the intersection of Lovecraft and video games. I'm gonna keep saying it now that I know it bothers you.
Well, just because it makes me think of intersectionality, which I hate.
That's fair. That's not where I was going.
Which thing I hate? To quote the Bible.
Which thing I hate?
Yeah. So I really like the game, and I figured we would kind of get more into talking about it as everything progressed. But I literally only made one note about the game, and it was on my first time playing it. Back, the date is September the 22nd, which, of course, as everyone knows, is Bilbo and Frodo's birthday.
Yeah, that's the most important of the things that happen on that date in our lives for sure.
Oh, definitely. It certainly isn't our grandparents' anniversary by far.
No, that's. I mean, it's there. You're aware of it, but whatever.
Yeah. But ow, it freaking hurt. But yeah, this is literally the only note that I have for it, and that's this. The intro cutscene narrator sounds like the narrator for the Laser Collection.
Wow. It's the Laser Collection 5. I did not even think about that, but yeah, you're pretty spot on.
It's like it definitely has that. I have a friend who may be able to do a cool voice vibe to it. That's the.
That's the funny thing about this game. So I don't know how much you looked into it before you bought it or played it, but I mean I did just a tiny bit, but that's only because I don't remember why I was on Steam. I was just on my Steam account and I saw that this game was like $3 a piece or $2 or whatever it was. So I bought like a copy for each of us just so we'd do this review. And I ended up reading into it a little bit, and it's so funny. Because the first one was kind of like that. It was pretty low budget, nothing really spectacular, and then it did so well that they made a sequel, and apparently everyone hates the sequel.
It's funny.
I just see so many bad reviews for the sequel. Okay, and if you look at this, it's I need to start talking about this part of it because we should probably describe the basics of the game first. So I refuse to play this style of game and not call it a roguelike because that's the way that I heard it the first time, and I don't feel like changing it now.
It is a roguelike.
Well, roguelite is what people keep telling me to call it when I call it roguelike, but whatever.
That's stupid.
Roguelite. So for those of you who aren't really aware, this is like a kind of a top-down view. I think some of my favorite people used to refer to it as the God view. You're playing a game in which you have a few characters that you get to use. If you're playing with a console, it's what you'd call the dual stick shooter. So you have one stick for movement, one stick for aiming and firing whatever weapon you have. This was part of that resurgence, however many years ago this was, where people were taking the lower bit, 32-bit style games, and then making them into something a little bit more So it feels endearing. It feels like an old school game, but it has so much more to do. So many more little details, larger areas, a little bit better animations. So you still get that nostalgic feel, but you still have the vast majority of all the nuances of a more modern game. So that's the makeup that I took away from it. It's part of that. It was part of that 16-bit resurgence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's kind of the tail end of it, but still part of it.
Yeah. It was also definitely made by between 1 and 3 dudes.
Yeah, I think it was exactly 3 dudes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I also just looked this up because I was curious. The difference between a roguelike and a roguelite. And I also think that so roguelite is just a play on roguelike. Is what it is. So it's like it's basically like effectively the same thing because obviously there's I said there's only one rogue. It may have been like a rogue 2, but I mean, there's only one within the context of what I'm saying. You know what I mean by there's only one rogue, and so things that are similar to rogue, that have some of the same elements, things like procedurally generated maps and permadeath and a few other things like that. Then keeps those aspects of rogue. Then it's a roguelike. But then some people had things like so roguelite is almost like a joke title. Now people take it very seriously, but it's more of a joke title because any game that's similar to another game is fair to say this game is similar to that game. Just like Souls-likes. There are so many Souls-likes that feel almost nothing the same as Dark Souls. I don't want to get into this, but I am genuinely annoyed at the Souls-like category because there's a few YouTubers that I follow that their main shtick is that they popped off at the releases of certain Souls games. So for Aggie it was Dark Souls 3, for Pod it was pretty much Elden Ring, and you have these people that because of that they play a lot of Souls-like games, and it's like anything that has a sword or anything that has something that's similar to the bonfire concept where you respawn at these certain activated checkpoints. Every single one of those games is a Souls-like now. It's so annoying. I don't want to go into it, but it does make me it makes me want to stop watching videos. Yeah, but and so anything that has so same thing though, to be an actual Souls-like, you probably say there are 3 or 4 elements. So if you have these, and Dark Souls or Demon Souls, however whichever one you want to go by, was the game that comes to mind that has those. It's the game that kind of pioneered those things, and then this game has those things also. Then you would say, oh, this game, I can call this game a Souls-like, and it's the same thing with with Rogue. So basically the procedurally generated levels and the permadeath is roguelike. But then people have said if there are certain permanent upgrades that you're able to get while playing, then that makes it roguelite, and they call it roguelite because it's easier. It's not the rogue experience, it's roguelite.
Yeah, in this game is a good example of roguelite because permadeath is not a thing, right? That's not a concept. You can die and die and die, and it's fine.
Okay, so see, I didn't even know that was the thing. Well, then, so permadeath is one of the requirements. To even be honest, so that would then classify this as just a procedurally generated, or is it even procedurally generated? I don't even know that.
If you look it up though, that this is interesting. I didn't know what you just said, but that we must have transcended it a little bit for our title making purposes, because you think about what is, in my opinion, the greatest roguelike game that's come out in a very long time, which is Hades. Hades is a phenomenal game. Not permadeath, definitely a roguelike.
Okay.
By given title.
Okay, because the only thing that I can find is both roguelike and roguelite. Um, uh, in order to officially be classified as that, permadeath must be a thing. Which, I mean, obviously, I don't care about that. I would say, even without it, I would say it is. But because if
No,
it's,
no. I'm with you. I'm agreeing with you. What I'm
yeah,
saying is it's funny. It's like that no longer seems to be anything that people care about because again,
yeah,
Hades is again the greatest roguelike, and it's sold as a roguelike. Its description is a roguelike. Definitely no permadeath.
yeah. Well, also we have plenty of games that are sold as Souls likes that, you know,
That are not.
have nothing to have no similarities. But
But we're digressing, aren't
yeah, a little tiny bit, but that's, I mean, we've gone farther without than we normally have. 5 minutes.
Let's see. So this is. I don't think there's any way to make the. I don't think there's a right way to make a Lovecraft game when it comes to the style of game, because
Yeah.
for me, what makes a Lovecraft game is you have to find the right elements to kind of give the feeling of Lovecraftian horror, which I mean is that the slowly creeping existential dread. And you have to have that. And I don't necessarily think that it has to be, the actual, the outer gods or the great ones or any of this kind of nonsense. It doesn't have to be one of the canon, the like original Lovecraft canon individuals to be a part of that. I don't really care too much as long as you can recreate that feeling. I'll allow it. So this is not the type of game I would have ever thought of as being a Lovecraftian game as far as the genre, but they pull off that part of Lovecraftian horror very well, very very well. You can find notes as you run across the game that that will give you that kind of like slowly creeping build. The monsters enemies that you face at the beginning aren't as creepy as the ones you'll get as you get further into your initial area. Everything builds off of each other in just the right way. And by the time you're getting information about the old ones and everything, you're losing sanity, which you can replace with chocolate. Kind of funny. But you have the sanity factor of the game. You have the slow creeping horror, and I do think it's hard to do a dual stick shooter incorrectly as far as the action goes. It's very easy to program a dual stick shooter as far as like saying, what should we do? You give them a weapon that fires things, and then wherever you point the stick is where that fires. Congratulations, you've pulled it off. So that's not difficult.
Okay.
What is difficult is to pull off the Lovecraftian horror part that they've done. Because think of how many games or movies or shows or whatever that are supposed to be Lovecraftian that just absolutely tank when it comes to like trying to pull off the actual horror part.
Now, I will say this: it's also actually incredibly difficult to make a good a good twin stick shooter. Also, there are lots of good ones, but because you have to really know what. So as far as the programming of it goes, like hey, you're gonna move here and do that. That's very easy. But as far as like the balance of the action goes, it's so easy when you're making those to just make a bullet hell.
Yeah,
there are no good bullet hells.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to I was about to say bullet hell when you said that, because I agree with what you're saying. What I mean, all I meant by that was it's not hard to make a game. If you're a game developer, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's not easy. If you're a game developer, it's not hard to make a game go, I want to make them move with this stick and then they will shoot with this stick. As long as you don't flip and put the movement on the right side, you've got the mechanics down.
Yeah.
But they took the storyline and they did the right thing.
Which is why it's much easier when you're playing mouse and keyboard, because there's no way to mess that up. You move with WASD and you click where you want to shoot.
I won't lie to you. I did something that's genuinely stupid.
I believe you.
Just feel like I'm already all in. So I bought a copy for each of us on Steam for a computer.
Yeah.
I then proceeded to spend $9 more to buy it for PlayStation so I could play it with the dual sticks, because I do love dual stick shooters. I do love the gameplay, and I realized after just a few, just sitting at the keyboard for a second, going, I'm not going to like this. I don't like playing what is made as a dual stick to not like this. So I spent more money and actually played it on PlayStation.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you know what do you know what I would have recommended?
Plugging my controller into the computer.
Yes.
No, I know. It's also much easier for me to play a game downstairs on my couch on my giant television. Makes me happy.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
But anyways, and so I think that you don't really have to capture necessarily, in order for it to be a good Lovecraft experience, you don't necessarily have to capture the creeping dread of Lovecraft. And the reason why I say that is because there's a the horror of Lovecraft, and so you don't think of it necessarily as the horror of Lovecraft because it's been done for so many things after that. But it's
yes.
I thought I had a head in my mouth.
Oh, delicious.
But he legitimately was the first kind of big author to do this. And so you didn't expect that from people, but he you expect him to have been the first when you're just looking ahead or looking back at all stuff throughout history. But that's because this is the thing that so many people have mimicked, and I think it's because maybe they thought that the creeping existential horror wasn't going to be their style, or they couldn't pull it off, or maybe they didn't even like it. I don't know. Or it could have been that or it could have been, they thought that that's him and only he can do that and I can't, or I don't know what exactly it was why they did that, but there's a lot of Lovecraft aspects that you see in more modern science fiction and modern horror, and I say modern, I'll say post Lovecraft, because technically Lovecraft is modern, but
by definition, yeah.
Yeah, so so I guess postmodern. No, post Lovecraft stuff.
Take it back.
I'm sorry. Yeah, but even in the what you see from the other more modern science fiction and horror and stuff is Lovecraft's not the creeping existential horror, but it's an extreme. So I don't mean this the way people mean it today, but the literal meaning of it, an extreme xenophobia. Mm-hmm. And so now that I'm going to, because a lot of people may only think of how people mean it today. So xenophobia means a fear of the strange, right? And so it's extreme. So that is, this thing is extremely strange, otherworldly even. And so you're afraid of it. You've never seen this thing before. What is it? Oh, also it's evil, and so be afraid of it. And so that you see that a lot in modern science fiction and in modern horror. But Lovecraft was kind of the pioneer of that. Mm-hmm. And that's another reason why people thought that he was the modern definition of xenophobic, was because he was it was because his stories involved that and whatever. That's bullcrap. But they and so I think you could also do that and make it a good Lovecraft game. Now you could make it anything really and do that. And with that, so it would have to follow Lovecraft mythos And so basically that's all you technically need to make a Lovecraft game is follow the Lovecraft mythos, or you can call it Lovecraftian and give that existential creeping horror that you'd expect from Lovecraft, and then you could call it, but then so you could say similar to Lovecraft's style, without having any actual Lovecraft, but the two things. So if it follows Lovecraft mythos, then I would say it's technically a Lovecraft game, even if you don't pull off the horror well. But then there are two directions you could go with the horror. The first one is the creeping existential dread, and that's the classic thing that people think of with Lovecraft. And that's because, when you think of the classic Lovecraft books, what are the characters going through? So you think of The Color Out of Space, or the Dunwich Horror, or Shadow over Innsmouth, stuff like that. Those are the books that are going to say, yeah, I can see, or I guess also Whisper in Darkness. Those are the big ones that you really see, like, oh yeah, these people are, they have this creeping horror that's going to happen. But then you also have an element from a lot of really good Lovecraft stories, that there is no indication of horror, or that is, of what the horror is. Like, you see something and it scares you, but no one has any. The reader does, and so the reader still has the creeping existential horror. But if you're playing a game, you kind of would, expect the game character to be going through what the book characters are going through in a way. And so the characters do not experience the horror until they experience it. At the Mountains of Madness is a good example of that. They say, oh, hey, here's this dead body. That's cool. Let's experiment on it. Oh, everyone's gone. Well, that's weird. It must have been
It's the wind.
Yeah, must have, or who was the guy that disappeared? It must have been him.
Danceforth. What are you doing, Danceforth?
Yes. I've forgotten the guy's name.
You silly man. What are you doing?
And so they're like, well, let's go find Danforth and see what he's up to. Like, let's go find out why he did this. And oh crap, we know the old ones are here now. Okay, that's no good. Okay, let's get out of here. Let's run away. And then all of a sudden, they're like, they don't even realize they're running away from a Shoggoth. I hope you guys have already read The Mountains of Madness. They don't even realize they're running away from a Shoggoth until they look back and see it.
Yeah, and also you guys have had almost 100 years to read the book, so we can spoil it.
Yeah. And so that that immediate so to get across that it's not a creeping horror, but then that immediate crippling xenophobia as soon as you witness it is also, I think, a fair horror that you could put for a Lovecraft game.
Okay. So I'm about to say everything that you said, but much shorter, because there was something I wanted to say about trying to tie it back into the game. That wasn't a dig; it was just what I was thinking just now. But it can be if you want it to be.
Oh no, yeah, I'll allow it.
So it's very hard to make a game that is a real Lovecraft game that captures all of the Lovecraftian elements, because of some of the stuff that you said. But it's because, yes, all those things, the traditional xenophobia. No, it's not that you hate people from another country. That's a very narrow and ridiculous interpretation of the word. Shut up. It's not what it means. It can mean that. It's not what it is. Shut up. You have to have. I don't think you have to have Lovecraftian monsters. I'll allow it to not be Lovecraftian monsters, as we said that earlier. I'm okay if it's not that. I need there to be, for me to really accept that as that, it really needs to be those horrific elements. There's someone made like a just like a fighter game where you play as different old ones. That's hilarious. But like, even though you're literally fighting, Nyarlathotep is fighting Cthulhu, and I will still say this is not a Lovecraft game because it's so ridiculous. Because that's a game that actually exists, by the way.
I like it.
For what I really like in these types of games, you have to nail down one of two things. You either have to really make it feel like one of these stories would, where you're slowly getting into this thing that you start off your character starts off somewhat optimistic maybe, and then not really knowing what's going on, and then slowly descending further and further down into the madness and the horror. This game's a little bit strange because it definitely feels games where you have this much power, right? You'll walk into this game, Untold. You'll walk into areas with lots of monsters.
Mm-hmm.
You have no doubt that you can kill all of them. It might be like, wow, that was difficult, but there's never a spot where you're like, I'm not going to pull this off.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it difficult. That takes away from one aspect. So they do a really good job of incorporating all of the Lovecraftian stuff, the mythos stuff. They do a good job of incorporating all of that. So it's still a Lovecraftian game, in my opinion, but they take all of that kind of dread out of it. So this is the reason why the best Lovecraft games,
Whisper in Darkness,
in my opinion, that's not a game. That's a book.
Oh no! Well, so on my end, you hadn't finished saying that yet. So you said the best Lovecraft, and then I said Whisper in Darkness.
You're very wrong.
Well, that's not what I was trying to say. I'm just saying that's as far as you got in your sentence. I was comparing what your semi-optimism to Whisper in Darkness, because that's the way Akeley was for like even like up until like the very end. He's like, yeah, I got my dogs, I got my gun. They keep coming up, but I don't care. I'm gonna shoot them.
Yeah, but you still are going to keep hitting a wall. Like you hit a harder and harder wall the entire time.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, yes, Lovecraft stories start off with the optimism, but this entire game is optimistic. You actually win.
Mm-hmm.
You win.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations, you beat the game. You killed a bunch of old ones, or defeated a bunch of old ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean.
Which usually Lovecraft games end by usually you don't win. Usually at the end of it, you just the victory means you didn't lose.
Yeah. The victory is like you have very few people who walk away mostly okay. Call of Cthulhu is a good example. You have someone who technically has an ambiguous ending that isn't positive, but he's very much alive and like not about to die. Mm-hmm. So like most of them don't end that way. Some people go commit suicide literally at the ending of the book. Mm-hmm. All that kind of stuff, or they go completely insane via Innsmouth. Like there's all kinds of different ways you can reach an ending.
Innsmouth had a happy ending.
It did have a happy ending.
Statement, I will not kill myself.
I won't kill myself. I'm going to go become a fish. So with games like this, that takes away from that aspect. So the only way, in my opinion, you can make a true Lovecraftian game is via like the Sinking City and the Call of Cthulhu game, detective games. Mm-hmm. The worst types of video games that exist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the problem. The worst type of video game genre that exists, in my opinion, and good lord, it has to be a good chunk of people. It's a terrible genre. That's the only way to pull it off. You're not armed heavily. You're not going to be doing a bunch of combat where you're just kicking butt all the time. You're not overpowered. You have to think your way out of this. Mm-hmm. Those are the true Lovecraft, which is why The Sinking City is the greatest Lovecraftian video game, and it's a trash genre. But this game does a good job. It makes you feel Lovecraftian, but it's a twin shooter. I mean, like you're still it doesn't. You don't feel helpless. You've got multiple guns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So also, I'm gonna say this too. I thought so there was a game that this game with mythos. Or different mythos. It has its own mythos, but this game with the Cthulhu mythos would have been at that point would have been the ultimate Lovecraft game. And I don't know why it didn't. Yeah, I don't know why it didn't. It wasn't made that way. Or no. I mean, I also I don't know what that sentence was supposed to have meant. But if this game had a different mythos and it was a Cthulhu mythos, it would have been the ultimate perfect Lovecraft game. And it's a game that I thought you liked. And so I'm confused why we didn't bring this up. But what about Outlast? See, I thought you were a huge Outlast fan, and
I'm a pretty big Outlast fan.
and it perfectly encompasses the spirit of that Lovecraftian horror. It's just not Lovecraft. It's a whole different mythology.
Yeah. So two things to point out about Outlast. One, yes, it's its own standalone thing. It has all the same thing. It has all the same concepts of a Lovecraft game. Also, essentially a detective game.
Yeah, yeah, but so you said it was the worst genre of game, so I was saying, yeah, but look at games like Outlast. Like some games pulled off really well, and they've become good games. That's what I was saying, because you said you said you admitted to liking Outlast.
No, I like Outlast a lot, but it's definitely not. I would never call. It's not. I would never give the title of best Lovecraft game to a game that is not Lovecraftian mythos in nature. When there are games out there that rely solely on the Lovecraft mythos.
and that's why I said it could have been.
Yes.
if someone made Outlast but made it with Lovecraft mythos, it would then be the best Lovecraft game.
Fair. Let's at least pretend like we're going to talk more about this game. Let's see.
Okay, I like that it has shotguns.
Okay. Yeah, especially so when you start off, you end up with 4 playable characters if you beat the entire game. I believe it's 4. I didn't play as all of them. Your starting character is the detective,
and then
if memory serves.
Yeah, and then you unlock the doctor or the scientist,
mad scientist, whatever you want to call him.
The chemist. And you unlock him, and then I think who's it that you get after that? The witch. I've not played as the witch, but apparently if you play as the witch, all those random bones that you pick up, she can throw them as grenades.
Yeah, I've seen. I did watch. I did do a little bit of my due diligence and at least watch playthroughs of each one. So technically, if you watch them in order, it would be the detective. And by the way, there's actually 5 characters. I was wrong. I'm double checking my stuff here. You go detective, chemist, whatever, witch, thief, and then ghoul.
Oh, you play as a ghoul. That's interesting.
Thief, then ghoul, and then the thief, I believe, is like the femme fatale kind of character, which the witch kind of is, but not quite. But yeah, so you go through, and you're really going through a lot of the same stuff, which, whatever, who cares? But you do get to, I'm assuming if you played through it with a detective at least, you probably got to take on at least one old one?
Trying to remember. I had a boss. I've only had 1 or 2 boss fights. I had a random mini boss encounter at one point. Someone there was an item that said do something, and then I did the thing, and all of a sudden it flashed and a mini boss popped in the arena with me, and it was spoopy.
Yeah, there's a lot of mini bosses. I mean, quite a few.
But
because I mean, again, this style of game does this a lot.
Yeah, I've only had 1 health bar enemy, but I don't remember who it was. I believe it. I remember it being Mythosy, but I can't remember. I can't remember. So, oh yeah, I know what this thing is. Oh, it was Starspawn. A Starspawn.
A Starspawn. Okay, yeah. Those exist. There's a bunch of enemies that are what you'd call mini bosses. They're not difficult necessarily to take out. But you do get to, if you go far enough, you will get to actually fight named old ones. I think Dagon is the first one that you actually have access to fight, which I got to do as the detective, which is nice because that's the best character. Follow up to best character is the thief. Lots of slashing, so it's more of a melee build, but still really fun. Yeah, you do get to take on old ones. You get to defeat them. That's the reason why it's kind of strange, because technically speaking, if you're going for full Lovecraftian, you wouldn't have the ability to win, and this game does feel like you win, which is odd. But again, it's hard because it's a video game. That's what makes it difficult. Is you don't think of playing video games and then having it end where you lose, right? Like that's not a normal or common thing. It's not something you're shooting for. So it makes it difficult to pull off the Lovecraftian games, which the the detective style games, you can actually get to an ending and it be a bad ending, and you're still just like, oh no, that was okay. Like there was never a point where I was being overtly optimistic about how powerful I am because you're walking around hiding because of how powerful you're not. So like the endings seem more Lovecraftian, and these endings to most video games have to feel more neat and tidy.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it gets kind of ambiguous.
Yeah.
I don't know what else about the game in specific is worth mentioning without like trying to spoil any of it, because obviously that's not the point. I do think it's well done for what it is. I know you and I had this conversation after we first started playing it. It's this particular style of game is not. It's not my favorite. I like it relatively well, but it's not something I would reach for all the time unless it had a really cool concept like this one. I do enjoy them, but again, like the better roguelikes are more like Hades, which is a little bit more multi-styled instead of just like here's a gun and here's 2 sticks and go have fun, because like you think about the ones that came out at the beginning of the PS3 era were just essentially bullet hells. So this is the best version of this style of game. It's not something I play all the time.
Yeah, also, I'm also going to put this out, too. In my opinion, the best roguelikes aren't even twin stick.
That's fair.
Yeah, because the best roguelike game ever made, at least I guess I haven't played all of them. The best roguelike game of all the ones that I've played was Dead Cells.
I don't remember Dead Cells.
Dead Cells it's really good. It's a 2D platformer, but since it has it has all of the other roguelike elements to it, and so since because all you need to be a roguelike is permadeath and procedurally generated maps for the most part, and then there are a few other potential things that are good to have. But as long as you have those things, you're a roguelike. And this was actually the first. This was the first like big, huge game that everyone said was a roguelike. Well, I say that the first one that people said that and they were wrong because it didn't have any of that stuff was what's that game called where you play as like an insect and you have a needle as a weapon and it's really fun.
An insect with a needle as a weapon?
Yeah, and all your enemies are insecty or beetles in some way or other. Oh man, people are gonna get mad at me for forgetting what this game is called, but it's a really good game. I just can't think of the name of it. It's people have been going nuts ever since its release over its soundtrack because it has a really good soundtrack. It's a Japanese piano player composed all the music for it. And
are you doing that thing where you describe it very, very poorly and you're just saying, "Oh, insect with a needle," and now I just don't know what you're talking about because of how vague you're being?
Well, like your weapon is actually called a needle. Hollow Knight.
You idiot! Yes, you're doing that thing where you describe.
No, I'm not. Your weapon is literally called a needle in the game. It's called a needle, and everyone is called like grasshopper and beetle, and like it's literally insects in the game.
But But I'm just saying that's the thing you do. Like you're an insect with a needle, and there's so many other ways to describe Hollow Knight that make so much more sense than an insect with a needle stabbing insect.
There were no other ways to describe it without getting to what I was going to say.
How about the side-scrolling Souls-like game that everyone freaked out about for a decade?
Exactly. And that's getting to what I was going to say, because people have classified it as a Souls-like and a Souls-light, which Souls-light isn't a thing, and they've also classified it as a roguelike and a roguelite, and roguelite shouldn't be a thing, but the actual classification of Hollow Knight is it has the same classification as Blasphemous, which is it is a Metroidvania.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at.
Blasphemous is pretty great.
Blasphemous is the best Metroidvania game, including the Metroid and Castlevania games.
including the actual ones.
But yeah, that's yeah, I have no idea what else to say.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered. I mean, we didn't because we never actually cover the games when we talk about the games. That would be too.
Why would we do that?
They expect that to happen.
They're expecting guys in army outfits.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. But yeah, so it's a game that's worth playing. If you like if you I almost said Souls-like games. If you like Lovecraftian kind of games, it's really worth it for the way they do the lore. It's really well done in that aspect. I think it's mechanically sound as that roguelike sort of genre. Yeah, it's worth playing. It's just
it's a fun game.
It wouldn't be everyone's kind of game because I know a lot of people who just won't play, and I'm one of these people for the most part. I won't pretend like I'm not. Most people don't like to just jump in and play like, oh, why is this game? Why would you make a game that looks like a 1632 whatever bit game when you can play these modern AAA titles? You might be turned off by the graphics if you weren't didn't grow up playing games that look like this. You have no nostalgia factor, but it's got a lot of really good mechanics. It's easy to learn how to play very quickly, and the way that they introduce the more complicated stuff is nice and evenly paced, so where it doesn't feel like you're being just kind of overwhelmed with all the little we'll call it mini mechanics of the game. And for the price, I mean, it's on sale on Steam all the time. When I bought it, it wasn't the only time it was $3, and it was $3. So I mean, it's for $3. I mean, but you'll spend hours on a game you paid $3 for. That's a win-win.
Yeah, it's a fun game. Now I need to let you guys know this. There will be, this may or may not disrupt your service. I'll have to see how our log of episodes looks and everything. But just so you know, October the 29th is a Saturday, and we record on Saturdays. And there will be we will not be recording a typical podcast episode. We may have a YouTube video made on that day, but we will not have your typical podcast episodes being recorded on October the 29th because we will be spending that entire day playing Modern Warfare 2.
Yes, I know it's very normie to get really into a new Call of Duty release, but that's kind of been, we kind of grew up in the era that FPSs were really taking shape because when we were starting to play games, the FPS genre was being invented, and we just have to kind of embrace the norminess of being Call of Duty is still one of the greatest running FPSs, and it's going to come out, and we're going to play the crap out of it, and we're going to enjoy ourselves.
Indeedy. Okay, bye.